Welcome again, my friends, to another episode of my Feelings Over Tea podcast. I am your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks. I am excited for you to be joining me today, yet again, for another episode. Today, I'm going to take just a few moments of your time to talk about something that is really important, and I think all of us at some point in time in our lives, if we haven't already come up to it, we will experience at some point. I want to talk about a year of firsts, FIRSTS, navigating major life changes. So, when I talk about this year of first, what I'm talking about is that first year that you're experiencing all the things post a loss. So, last episode, I was talking about the grieving process and going through grief and how you navigate your grief journey and what that looks like. And so, when you think about that first year post like a major life change, something major that has happened in your life, whether it's death of a loved one or a friend, job disruptions where maybe your job ends abruptly and it was unexpected. You're navigating and relocating to a new community. So whether that's where you live, a new country, these major life changes, motherhood, becoming a new mom for the first time, navigating your relationship. So, a relationship status change, whether it's through divorce, marriage, getting engaged, those are all things that change. And the year of first, I think, is like a really big concept. And I was recently, again, having a conversation with someone, and this came up, and we were talking about first. And I thought, oh my goodness, this would like make a good topic to just jump on and talk about for a little bit and just share some of my thoughts. And so here we are. So I just want to jump into this and really talk about what this looks like. In honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to tackle this emotional roller coaster of first after a major life shift. So, shout out to Vivian Green, Emotional Roller Coaster. If you've not heard that song before, check it out because it is real. It aligns with what I'm going to be talking about today. And let's just jump into this. All right. So here we go, starting this new episode right here and right now.
Welcome to my Feelings Over Tea podcast, where experts and everyday people will sip tea and spill the tea about all things life and mental health related. So grab yourself a cup of tea and join me, your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks, for hot topics, helping you to cut through the muck of life and live your life well in my Feelings Over Tea podcast, right here and right now.
So, welcome again, my friends, to another episode of my Feelings Over Tea podcast. I'm your host, Dr. NaKaisha. And as I was talking about, we're talking about a year of firsts. And so, thinking about those first holidays without old traditions, your first birthday in a new reality, those first times can remind us sometimes of what we've lost, and it may hit like a wave. And when you think about that thing that has happened in your life, I want you to take a minute just to think about the first following that thing that happened, that major life shift, that life change that happened. And like I said on the last episode, I talked about grief and how we show up in grief and how grief shows up and how it can really change how we navigate our lives. And grief and adjustment don't follow in this straight line. So, like grief and the grieving process, it is not a linear process. It loops and curls and whips and whirls and does all of these crazy, silly, goofy things. And so we want to just think about when we're navigating our first, what does that look like? What does it feel like? How do we navigate it in a way that allows us to come out on the other side relatively unscathed? And I say relatively unscathed because, again, like I said, it's not this linear process that you just go from point A to point Z and you just navigate through it and kind of skate like you're on ice, right? But you may fall a few times and you may, get some bumps and bruises from the journey, but that doesn't mean that you stop and give up. But the first can really tell us a lot about ourselves and how we navigate through change. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about just three key insights or things that I've thought about as we're talking about the emotional ups and downs of this first year. So one of the insights or things that I've thought about is that first can feel really lonely and unsettling and unpredictable. But the one thing that I think is helpful is to understand the patterns in our mental health during these transitions, which can help us to manage and navigate this process a little bit better. So just thinking about how is my mental health impacted by this major life change? And then what do I need to do about that? So grief, like I said, is this nonlinear process. And grief really does come in unexpected waves. So one moment you might be feeling great, you're feeling okay. You might even be feeling hopeful. And then suddenly a smell, I've had that happen before. I smell something and it reminds me of somebody or a time in my life. A song, so sometimes we get hit by that. You're driving down the road and all of a sudden that song comes on. You can't turn the radio off fast enough. Or maybe you're sitting at home and all of a sudden a song comes on and you're reminiscing about a certain time in your life. Or even an old routine can bring on a surge of sadness. So, a routine about how you used to do certain things, and then all of a sudden you're unable to do that, right? So maybe you've had a surgery or something that was unexpected that happens, and you're no longer able to get up and have the same routine that you've had before because now you're in a different phase of life, in a different routine. So just thinking about all of this can really bring on some different emotions. And when these emotions come up, that doesn't mean that you're regressing because you're feeling a certain way about what has happened, but it means that your brain is adjusting to the absence of something that was once routine or normal or present for you. Another thing, as we're kind of talking about like the brain and how our brain processes these things, is your brain and your body process change differently. So they're not always in alignment as to when change happens. So you might logically understand that life has shifted, but emotionally, your nervous system has this way of reacting on its own timeline. So you may begin to experience certain things like anxiety may creep up. So you're starting to feel really anxious about something, or you may start to experience fatigue or even physical symptoms that can arise as you process this life adjustment that is happening. I know sometimes people will say, I've experienced this, and even working with different people may say, just started feeling like really low or really sad and couldn't understand it, or started feeling really jittery and really anxious. And I didn't realize what was going on until I like looked at the calendar, and that's it was the day that my loved one passed away, or it was the day that I lost my job and everything just went to, hell in a handbasket, right? And so sometimes you are not necessarily focused on a particular thing, but your body is like holding these emotions and this recollection of what has happened on a particular day or a particular time or with something specifically. So your brain and your body process change differently. Another thing I thought about is milestones bring mixed emotions. So I call this episode the year of first. And again, if you've been through something, if you've lost something, if you've transitioned from one stage of life to another, you've probably experienced the first. That first birthday after a big loss, the first holiday, the first time an old habit no longer fits your new reality, which can be huge. They all highlight change in a way that can feel really overwhelming. And so, one of the things that I think is super important to remember is that we have to acknowledge what is going on rather than resisting what is happening, because it can help you to feel like you're more in control. And one of the things that we know about resisting things or just pretending maybe that it doesn't exist is that it's going to show up bigger. And it's going to come. It's going to show up at some point in time. So just acknowledging it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to accept it as it shows up, maybe in that moment, but we have to acknowledge this particular thing rather than resist it, which allows us, again, to be in control and then be able to work through whatever that life change is or that first is versus not doing that. And just thinking about how you're really doing yourself a favor, right? You're serving yourself well to acknowledge what is actually happening. So, three strategies I want to kind of talk about. I just, shared with you kind of some key insights or things that I've thought about how we can be aware of the adjustments and what happens there. But then, how do we navigate that year of first? And this will most certainly look different for every single person. But navigating through that year first with some sense of peace is probably what many of you, I, have wondered. How am I going to get through that thing? And one of the things that I have found helpful, and again, as a therapist and coach and just mentoring people over the years, one of the things that I have found helpful is creating new rituals that honor the change. So you go through this change and you're maybe dreading that year of first. How can you navigate it a little bit better? And so one of the things that I think about is creating a new ritual that honors that change. So instead of avoiding holidays or particular milestones, maybe you think about what would be helpful for me to do differently that may not make it as dreadful or as painful. And so creating something meaningful to mark the shift can be helpful. So, for example, just thinking about, let's just say you've had to relocate to a new city, and every major holiday, maybe like your birthday and your friends' birthdays, and maybe like Thanksgiving or Easter or something like that, if you celebrate those holidays, you go to Luigi's, which is an Italian restaurant. Not anywhere I know of. I really just made that up in my head. So shout out to Luigi's if it is real thing. But let's just say you go to Luigi's and all of a sudden you're in this new city and your friends aren't there, but they're willing to travel to you. And you're like, but I really want to be back home and go into Luigi's with you guys, and I miss it so much. So think about, how can I start this new tradition in this new place? So maybe that's an opportunity to branch out into this new community that you're residing in to find a new Luigi's. So maybe it's not called Luigi's, maybe it's called Mario, Mario's Italian restaurant. And so you try it out, but creating and thinking about a new way of honoring this change, right? It's giving you a new opportunity to look through a different lens to say, okay, I can create a new ritual for particular holiday or milestone that's happening within my life. And I think that that's really important, that you honor that for yourself and give yourself the opportunity to actually embrace what has changed. Who knows? You may even like it. Another strategy that I think can be helpful is to schedule intentional reflection time. So, again, scheduling intentional reflection time. And what this does is it gives you the space to process your emotions on your own terms. So, it's not necessarily saying that someone else is saying, okay, you've got 2 days to adjust to this major thing, but you're intentionally reflecting on what has happened. You're intentionally reflecting on the change, the first, the space that you're in, and you're giving yourself the permission. I guess that's what I want to say. That's a great word. You're giving yourself permission to process the emotions on your own terms, to deal with what is going on. So instead of being caught off guard by emotional triggers, you take the moments that are coming to check in with yourself and say, okay, where am I at? How am I feeling? What do I need? Is there something that I need? Is there something that would be helpful in this moment for me? Right? You may be thinking, well, how even do I do that? If you're a journaler and you like to journal, you may start to journal and write things down. It may just be quiet reflection where you find a nice little cozy nook in your home, your apartment, right? Your condo, whatever. Maybe you go to local coffee shop again, and you're accessing what you have within your community that you can use to just sit in quiet reflection and say, how am I? How am I dealing with this change that has happened? And you might even try therapy. Hello, fellow therapist here. Therapy is not a bad option. In that year first, which is a difficult thing to sometimes navigate, it may be that you need another person to just sit and process through those emotions with, just to ensure that you're navigating it with support. So, again, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about therapy and the things that are out there to help you, so that you're not navigating this alone and that you're not struggling where you don't need to be. So, journaling, therapy, or even quiet reflection can be great ways to intentionally reflect on and process those emotions that are coming up for you, as you're navigating this change and this year of firsts. So take a breath, take a breath, take a breath, take a breath. If this is you and you are navigating this year of first, I just want to give you kudos and say, awesome, keep going, don't give up, because the things that you're doing can be helpful. Again, not ignoring the emotions that are coming up, but just identifying what you need to address that can help you navigate this change in the best way possible. So, the final thought that I have, just as far as a strategy, and this is something that you probably already have going on. So, if you do, give yourself a pat on the back because you're a step ahead of the game, is to build your support system and build it early. So, change again, it can be difficult, but it can be easier to navigate when we have support. So, navigating change alone does make it harder, but knowing who's in your corner, who you can pick up the phone and call or send a text message to or connect with over coffee or tea or lunch or dinner or whatever the case may be, knowing who you've got in your corner can be helpful. So if it's a group of close friends, it might be an online community. Again, during COVID, like I think that was one of the things that I thought was like supremely dope is that there were so many different groups and online communities that we had access to connect into to support one another and just be with, right? That, if you've got access to that, lean into these online communities, y'all, because they can really, really be helpful. It may be like a local like grief group or some type of other supportive group in your community. Maybe it's a religious type of group or community that you want to connect into. But being around people who understand your experience can often, just soften the sting of isolation and feeling like I'm the only one going through this. I was laughing with someone a while back, and I had shared this with one of my physicians, and we kind of laughed about it because when I was pregnant with my children, I was the only woman on earth who had ever been pregnant. You couldn't tell me any different. My doctor would always laugh, and she's just like, "Oh, honey." And I'm like, "Listen, nobody else is going through this. Nobody understands my pain." And she was like, "You're absolutely right." She totally leaned into it. Girl, it's been so many millions and millions and millions of women that have been pregnant. But in that moment, when I was going through this year of first, this transition, I felt like I was the only one. It felt very isolating in the moment, but connecting into community with other pregnant women and other moms and those different communities and networks really helped to support me during that time so that it wasn't such an isolated experience. So, again, build your support system and build it early. Your support system, and again, it looks different for everyone. It may not just be close friends or family, but it may be online community. It can be complete strangers that you don't know who you actually get to know through connection of whatever that may be. So build your support system, know who those people are, lean into those supports to help you navigate through what it is you're going through that year of firsts. So again, I just wanted to jump in here and just kind of share about this year first. If you're going through this year first, if it's something that may be coming up for you, just think about what do I need to navigate this as best as possible. Transitions are tough, but you, my friend, are stronger than you think. The first year, it's a journey. It's full of ups and downs, and also can be a lot of surprising moments of resilience. So, if today's episode spoke to you, Share it with someone who you know might be navigating their own year of firsts. Reach out and ask, how can I support you? Or know that I'm here just kind of on the sidelines cheering you on as you navigate this year of firsts. So that is all that I have for y'all. It was short, quick, and to the point. So let's continue to have these conversations. Feel free to connect with me on social media. So you can find me on Instagram at my feelings over tea. You can also check me out on YouTube at First Lady Giggles. That's one ST, Lady Giggles, Giggles. I want to thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert Banks. Remember that you're not alone in this, and healing comes in waves. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. I look forward to chatting with y'all soon. I'm out.